fashion does not exist, media, journalism does not exist in a vacuum. And it is so important to understand that it reflects the culture and to be open to what else is going on in the world of the arts. I mean, I always make a point when I'm in London to go to the theatre, to go to an exhibition, to see what else is happening in London. Last night, I just got off the plane and I went straight to the amazing Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, and I saw Hayley Atwell and Tom Hiddleston in the most incredible production of Much Ado About Nothing. And it was such an interesting production because
Oh,
it was so wonderful to see a young generation of theatre going audiences to see Shakespeare in a completely different light, because it was basically a musical set to the Beastie Boys and other 90s musical, and there was so much fun, so joyous. But there is the example of somebody taking a very classical medium and making it completely modern for today and telling it in a different way. And that's what I think all of us at Vogue and world of us, all of us in fashion have to do all the time, is to take what's known and reinvent it and make it new and fresh.
carry you home there on Virgin Radio. Tom Allen here. Now, as promised, we've got a very special guest today, and we're going to be talking about Vogue inventing the runway. Now, this is an immersive experience which charts the history and the impact of fashion, of the fashion runway, basically. And it's on display currently at London's Lightroom, and I'm beyond thrilled that my guest today is the legendary fashion and media executive who's been editor-in-chief of Vogue since 1988. Gosh, time flies. And Global Chief Content Officer of Condé Nast since 2020. She is, of course, Anna Wintour. Anna, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to hear that you saw the Lightroom yesterday. I'm interested to know what you thought.
Well, let me tell you, it is absolutely extraordinary. I just thought there was so much joy in it. It's just like it's the history of runway fashion, but it's about life and creativity. I just thought it was incredible. You must be so proud.
We are, and it was really came out of a conversation that we had with Nick Heintner when he approached us after the Hockney show, which I was lucky enough to see with David a few days before it opened, and it was so fascinating to see how involved David Hockney was in every single detail. So it was an extremely hard act to follow. But when Nick approached us, originally we were discussing doing something that was more about the history of Vogue itself. And I felt that, in a way, having been going to the shows for so many years and watching how much they had changed, it would be more interesting to our audiences and his audiences to understand how the runway really reflects the changing world of fashion. If you go back, as you saw in the show when you saw it, that it used to be a very closed off world where you had to be invited, you had to have a certain income, that the clothes were incredibly expensive, they were made to order. And as you saw how the fashion world changed and it became this unbelievably open, I don't know, universe in a way
Yes.
that was open to everybody. We chose to finish on Pharrell's extraordinary show in Paris, where it was live streamed to millions around the world. That really showed how fashion had changed and how the world had changed and how fashion reflects what's happening in culture.
I absolutely loved that. And I did feel it celebrates not just fashion as the clothes we wear, but also fashion as expression, as art, and as hope, I think. It felt like it was very timely to have something so positive in a world which isn't always so upbeat at the moment. I mean, what was
Well,
your
I'm very,
reason?
very
Yes.
happy to hear you say that, because I've had a few comments on how sometimes the models didn't smile enough. But I do feel that the whole atmosphere and the multimedia experience, you really feel that you're there. You feel that you understand the creativity but behind the 50 designers that we chose in the exhibition. And it is totally like being there, which was the whole idea of Nick and myself, to make his audiences, our audience, feel that they were actually at the show with us.
That absolutely comes across. I think because of the nature of the Lightroom as well, where you feel like it's all around you. It's every wall, and it's huge and enormous. And the music. There's at one point they're playing. I think it's Debussy, La Mer. I think is the piece of music, and it's
Yeah,
so rousing. You just feel
yeah.
like it's showing you what fashion is about, which is not, as I say, not just clothing. It's how you feel. It's feeling something. And I think in a world of phones and looking at our screens, that felt very welcome to me as well.
Yes, it's storytelling. It's really telling different stories and learning about different designers, where it's Nicola Ghesquière or Pierpaolo at Valentino, or some of the amazing English designers like McQueen that we showed. It really does reflect their minds and how they looked at fashion and what else was going on in culture at the time. But it was very interesting sitting there with David and seeing how his voice really explained what was happening in different points in his career, whether it was his stage career or the moments in Los Angeles where he changed everything and his whole view on perspective. And having that sort of rehearsal with him before we embarked on our own exploration with Nick and his team was so helpful and so interesting. And it's so wonderful to learn from Nick that we are being extended, and we're being extended in partnership with David Hockney, which is also such a great accolade to the work that Vogue has done on this amazing exhibition. And of course, it's in tandem with David's show opening at the Vuitton Foundation in Paris, 400 pieces, I believe, opening in April.
Wow. I mean, it's. I think what that shows to me is how you have been always so brilliant at acting as the intersection of all these different mediums, whether it's art, whether it's fashion, whether it's film, theatre, anything. You are amazing at bringing people together, and I think that's something that was sort of shown very clearly at the beginning of your time at Vogue, when you brought together those four supermodels, who I think really brought together the idea of modelling and
Yeah.
of course celebrity, which very much you brought together so excellently. That must have been an amazing, amazing moment, and I know you've had the most
Yes, well,
incredible.
the models, were our ambassadors at that time. But what's been so interesting, I think, when you look at the history of fashion, when I first started, we really were focused entirely on print and maybe a few not very flamboyant or media friendly events. And if you look at how fashion has evolved and how you now have to look at how you can talk to your audiences across all platforms and how you have to embrace the importance of events, certainly like Lightroom, which has been such a rewarding experience, and I think something that bring fashion into a very democratic light, as you rightly pointed out, but also events like Vogue World or the Met. This is just a way of bringing Vogue to audiences in a very different way and in a much broader way. And it's also global, which, of course, before we were just working very much in our own territories. And now Vogue exists, I believe, in 29 territories.
Mm.
And we all collaborate together, we work together, we exchange ideas. We're able to put a spotlight on a young designer working in Italy as easily as we are a young designer working in Japan, here in London, or in New York. So it's a totally immersive global experience and a way to talk to audiences in a way that we never could before.
Well, I think it's extraordinary to see that journey, and I know that your career has spanned an enormous journey, and I'd love to talk to you more about that if you don't mind staying with us. We'll chat more after this song. George Michael Freedom there. You're listening to Virgin Radio. Of course, the video to that song featured all of the supermodels, and that is very apt because Dame Anna Wintour is with me, and we're talking about Vogue inventing the runway. Dame Anna, thank you again for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
I should point out as well that Vogue inventing the runway is nothing to do with the proposed expansion of Heathrow, is it? It's not that sort of runway.
Not that I'm aware. We have not been,
Mm.
no one has called us for that, but we'd be happy to advise.
Oh, I would like to see it. That then it would happen. I feel like if you were in charge, Anna, then it would be built in about a day. Um, and you've been at the helm of Vogue, I know, since 1988. What I want to ask you, what advice would you give a young person starting out in business today? What have you learned?
Well, I think, Tom, I obviously all of us at Vogue try to help uh, a young generation of designers, journalists, photographers, videographers, whoever it may be within our industry. And I think where a lot of people tend to make mistakes, and maybe it's because of the social media culture that we live in today,
Mm.
they want to do everything too fast. And I think it's much more wise to find a mentor, a designer, someone whom you admire that you can work for or with for a period of time just to learn the ropes. There's so many different avenues to take. And I think when you start out, when you leave university or you leave college, design school, whatever it may be, you don't necessarily know exactly what it is you want to do. So use the time to learn and to study and to understand all the different parts of the business rather than to leap in with a collection and think that you are going to be the next Sarah Burton
Mm.
overnight. That's
Sure.
not very unlikely to happen, as brilliant as you may be. Better to spend the time learning.
I love that advice because I think, absolutely, as you say, we live in such a fast paced world and everybody is so desperate to kind of get on with everything yesterday. But actually
Yeah.
being thorough and learning a skill or a trade or whatever you like to call it, it does take time, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And the other thing is that fashion does not exist, media, journalism does not exist in a vacuum. And it is
Mm.
so important to understand that it reflects the culture and to be open to what else is going on in the world of the arts. I mean, I always make a point when I'm in London to go to the theatre, to go to an exhibition, to see what else is happening in London. Last night, I just got off the plane and I went straight to the amazing Theatre Royal in
Oh.
Drury Lane, and I saw Haley Atwell and Tom Hiddleston in the most incredible production of Much Ado About Nothing. And it was such an interesting production, but it was directed by the great Jamie Lloyd. And
Mm.
he had really, have you seen it yet, Tom?
No, I mean, I'm thinking of
Oh,
Sunset
Run.
Boulevard that I saw
No, no, no,
last
but
year, but
run and
okay.
see it because
Oh.
it was so wonderful to see a young generation of theatre going audiences to see Shakespeare in a completely different light because it was basically a musical set to the Beastie Boys and other 90s musical. And there was a lot of confetti, a lot of dancing, which Tom Hiddleston is brilliant at.
Well,
And it
yes.
was ensemble acting that really was a mixture between dancing and disco and music and of course Shakespeare, and it was so much fun, so joyous. But there is the example of somebody taking a very classical medium and making it completely modern for today and telling it in a different way. And that's what I think all of us at Vogue and world of us, all of us in fashion have to do all the time is to take what's known and reinvent it and make it new and fresh and understandable for different generations. So you can't do that alone. You have
Yeah.
to understand what other people are thinking.
Absolutely. And I think that is what people admire about you, actually, if you don't mind me saying. I think that people love the fact that you draw inspiration from all of culture, from everything going on, and you channel it, obviously, onto the pages of Vogue, but into everything you do. And Vogue is the physical representation of your work, but exactly the support that you give other artists and creative people, I think is what's seen you so admired by everyone, well, so many people around the world. Um, I,
Thank you.
I think it's.
Thank you. Well, I'm very, very passionate about the work that I do, and particularly the work that I do at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where
Mm.
we have supported the Costume Institute there now for almost 30 years. And we've been able to put a spotlight on what was honestly uh, a department buried in the basement with not a lot of visibility and help make it become one of the most exciting nights I think, culturally that exists in the world today. And that's because of the support of the fashion industry and the media and so many people around the world, because I think the brilliance of the exhibitions have made, going back to what we were talking about earlier, have made the exhibitions so interesting and brought in so many strands of history and culture, just as the exhibition that we are opening in May is, which is called Superfine. And really,
Yes, I'm very excited about that.
it's the first time, I think, in 30 years that we have dedicated an exhibition to menswear. And obviously, this is completely focused on menswear designers of color, black designers. And it really is exploring the history of the black dandy since the 1880s up until the present day. And it's
Wonderful.
such a exploration and has already garnered so much attention around the world. But that's another example of fashion really being part of the cultural history.
Yes, absolutely. I think I always think with fashion as well, it's not just fancy frocks. It's a huge industry as well. It's
It
worth,
is.
I think, in the UK, it's worth about £60 billion.
Yes. And
Obviously,
I'm
even more globally.
super excited about Laura Weir, who I think is joining the British Fashion Council
Oh
as its
yes,
new chief executive. And I think the way she is talking about trying to bring more cultural relevance to the British Fashion Week is so important, maybe to try and persuade the BAFTAs to coincide again with this week. I think it happened just last week, which was a shame because it's film and fashion are so deeply connected,
for sure.
or to talk to Freeze to see whether there might be some harmony there. So I think the more that we can bring different cultures into fashion and different forms of art, the more exciting it's going to be for our audiences and for the public.
We're all much richer for it. Absolutely.
Yes,
It's tremendous to talk to you. I really appreciate you making time for us today.
of course.
And are we going to see a retrospective of your career so far at any point, Anna?
No, no, what I'm working on currently is our next Vogue World,
Oh,
which is Vogue World Hollywood, and it is actually going to explore the connection between film and fashion.
oh, wonderful. Oh, well, I look forward to seeing that. And where will that
Yes.
be?
It'll be in Paramount Pictures in Los Angeles in October, so please come.
Okay, well, I'll let you know if I'm coming. But I was so impressed with Vogue inventing the runway, and it's had its run extended to the 29th of June, and
Yeah.
it's at London's Lightroom, which is very easy to access if you get the train to London at all. Any of our listeners out there, and the details are at lightroom.uk. That's lightroom.uk. Anna Wintour, thank you so much for coming
Thank you,
on the
Tom.
show, and have a wonderful London Fashion Week. We'll
Thank
speak to you
you.
soon.